Hey, my name is Brendan McCauley. I'm an entrepreneur just like you. But the real question is, who am I? What do I have? And why should you care? Stick around for this episode and find out. I've spent the last 5 years learning from the most brilliant entrepreneurs today. And now I've left my 9 to 5 to take the plunge and build $1 million business. The real question is, what does it take to become a successful entrepreneur and create financial freedom? This podcast is here to give you the answer. Join me and follow along as I learn, apply, and share insights from world-class entrepreneurs to grow my online business and create a community of raving fans. My name is Brendan McCauley, and this is Growing Entrepreneur. Welcome to the first official episode of Growing Entrepreneur. It has been one incredible journey to actually get really from where I had started all the way through to this point where I'm having a conversation with you now on my camera with my now beautiful setup, and I'm very excited to share this with you. So what I want to do is I want to really give you an insight. Who am I? Why should you care? What do I have to offer you? Like, what is this whole growing entrepreneur thing? And here's the funny part. If you're into marketing, you're probably familiar with Russell Brunson. And the one thing that he says, and he's the creator, the founder of ClickFunnels, he says most people will not watch your episodes until way later down the line. So chances are you're probably watching this episode now either because someone told you about it or you're coming later on down the line. Maybe you caught like a couple other episodes and said, all right, you know what, I kind of want to go back to the beginning and, figure out like, what is this crazy growing entrepreneur thing and can it help me? And people have talked about it, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe you're a friend of mine, you know me, and you just happen to be checking this out because I said, hey, here's the first episode, watch it. But most people don't really always know somebody's story, right? So it's really easy to either, pass judgment or just have an idea about what something's about. But what I wanted to do is just give you a total in-depth, transparent view of where was I at, how did it get me here, and kind of like what that story is in between, and the reason why I created this Growing Entrepreneur podcast in the first place. So let's back it up. And if you're just listening to the audio version, I highly recommend go back and watch this on the YouTube channel. It's going to be the full-length video portion of this podcast, and it's going to have all the pictures and other things I want to include in there just so you can really see, a lot of this transformation and how it got to really where it is right now. So all the way from the beginning, I'll take you from when I'm like a little kid. And when I had first started off, basically my parents had got a divorce when I was really young. And when they did that, what wound up happening was I'd actually turned to binge eating. And it was really challenging. So basically my parents, they split up, wound up getting new step parents and stuff. But through that, my coping mechanism was to turn to food. So the reason I tell you that is because that had a huge effect on me personally. That had a huge effect on just how I thought, the way I looked at things. And I'll be honest, man, like it was tough going to school. Like I'd go in there, I would wear jackets, and I live in Florida. Like I would wear jackets to try and hide the fat, and just, I was really ashamed of what I had looked like. And, kids would pick on me. So I became very sensitive to other people's feelings and how they thought and the way that they were perceived. So I just tried to make myself, very conscious of how I treated others, how I approached others. So through, kind of that journey, my mom had originally started going to Weight Watchers. And she invited me to come, because obviously I was struggling with weight at the time. And through Weight Watchers, that was really like my first glimpse into group coaching and how impressive having a support team really was to accomplishing your goals. So when I had started Weight Watchers, for a little kid, I weighed a pretty significant amount, probably 40 pounds more than I should have. And by the time I was done Weight Watchers, I dropped about 35. So like that for me was a huge transformation. And the reason I tell you that, and the reason I really harp on the weight loss portion, is because through that weight loss series, that weight loss, journey that I had gone through, it taught me a lot of really important principles that I apply in every area of my life, especially entrepreneurship. And that's what had eventually led me to write my first book, 13 Principles to Achieve Greatness. And actually, I'm looking at it right now. So through these principles, I just want to share these with you real quick. So first off, invested in yourself. So what I did, especially from a weight loss perspective, is why I invested in myself, right? So I invested time, I invested knowledge, I invested energy, I invested, going to the gym and sweating my ass off. But it all eventually paid off. The second principle was I learned that perception is everything. So the way that you see something can make all the difference in the world. The third one, watch your language. And through that, just what was the language that I was using for myself? When I looked in the mirror, was it positive, uplifting, or was it really, negative, like holding me back and just it was almost like beating myself down. And that's not good to do to yourself. I mean, you wouldn't do it to others, so like why do it to yourself? And that was something I had to seriously learn how to overcome because, I look at myself in the mirror and I didn't have the confidence. I didn't know how to present myself. I didn't have that ability to come off and really explain what it was that I wanted. I just, I knew I was in a spot where I didn't want to be anymore, and I knew I had to make a change. Principle number 4, and even Simon Sinek talks about this, it's discovering your why. So like what is the driving reason? Like for me, I wanted to lose weight, and that was my huge why. So I was able to go through that, and I had a tremendous transformation, and then that's kind of played through the rest of everything else that I've done. So consistently as we go through this podcast, one of the biggest things that I'll talk to those that either I interview or if I'm doing a solo show is figure out the reason why. Like what motivates you to push forward? What motivates you to get going? What motivates you, especially as an entrepreneur, to start from here or even from like down here and then eventually get you up? Because if you've got this driving desire that pushes you, that motivates you, that gets you to where you want to be, that makes such an incredible difference. And when I go to work with somebody, the first thing I do is I establish what's your reason for doing it. And when I did it for me, that was a burning desire. Like I had to have this happen because I was so sick and tired of where I was at. And you can really apply that same concept across the board, whether that's relationships, whether that's your business, whether the current job you're in, the 9 to 5, for weight loss, whatever that thing is that pushes you, allow that why to be the one thing that's going to take you from where you are to where you want to get to. Next one, visualization is key. So, the first thing that they tell you, anyone that's been successful, that's succeeded on some kind of crazy journey, whether it looks like they did it overnight or it took them, 15 years, begin with the end in mind. Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. Picture in your head what you want to see happen. And then what it does is it paints that roadmap, right? So it says, okay, it's much like a GPS. So when you go to plug in the coordinates, so like I live in Florida, and if I wanted to go to Disney, does the GPS say, okay, start here, and then it just starts tracking it out and eventually you get to where you're going? No, what happens is that the GPS puts the tracking location where you want to go, and then it carves a road back to where you're at, and then you have this road on where you want to get to. So especially as a growing entrepreneur, if you're to the point where it's, okay, I have an idea of where I want to get to, but I'm kind of cloudy, well, then your results are probably going to be a little cloudy. Getting stressed out is probably going to be more inevitable for you because you don't have a clear idea on where you want to get to. And a lot of what I like to do, especially in this show as we go, is we're going to define, okay, what was the biggest hurdle you had as an entrepreneur? So, assuming that I'm interviewing somebody, and how did you get over it? What was the end goal you had in mind? And then how did you eventually get there? So you'll be able to learn from these people, right? You'll be able to pick their brains, find out, what's the challenges and the struggles they had to overcome. And then ultimately you can apply these things in your life. And if there's certain areas or topics or things in particular that maybe you're struggling with yourself, like those are the kind of ideas and concepts that I'd love for you to shoot at me, send it to me in an email, in a contact, or even if if you've done super successful, amazing things yourself, or even just a little hurdle that you were able to overcome and you want to share that, I'd love to have you on this podcast. So then that way we can bring and spread this message to so many more people. Okay, now the next one is creating laser focus. So many times, especially for someone who's a brand new entrepreneur, and sometimes even for experienced entrepreneurs, half the trick is trying to make sure that you don't get what they call shiny object syndrome, right? So all of a sudden you're looking at this one thing and it's like, oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. Oh, a squirrel, and then all of a sudden you go absolutely everywhere. And one thing that I had to learn how to do was to not get blindsided by other things that will just randomly come out of nowhere and look like a better opportunity than what you're already focused on. Because the truth, and I'm going to say this from a financial standpoint, there's so many different ways for you to make money. So investing, real estate, online courses, whatever it is for you, Amazon, drop shipping, pick one and stick with it. So that's why, even for like the title of this podcast is Growing Entrepreneur, and the tagline below is focus, follow one course until successful from the weight loss perspective. My biggest thing was I had to say, okay, this is exactly where I want to go, and nothing is going to veer me off the path. I don't care what comes up. I don't care how many donuts there are. I don't care if someone brings over a whole thing of cookies or sweets or, whatever the deal was. I'm going to create laser focus. I'm not going to let anything distract me. And one of the biggest pieces was the time management and just the having a routine. Because when you have the routine, when you get up super early in the morning, that's when I really had established this concept of getting up at 4 a.m. And originally, I think I had even started with 5. And then from there, I remember reading a couple books and someone was like, okay, well, try and wake up, half an hour earlier and see what else you can do. And then I got into 4:30 and then I said, well, you know what, let me challenge myself again and let me see if I can push it back half an hour. So now I don't know. So I'm 32 now at the time of shooting this. And when I had first started, really getting into this routine, I was probably 17, 18, 19 years old. So that for me was kind of like my transition period. So, it's been going on for quite some time. And now getting up early like that is no problem. And then usually I'll go to sleep by anyone that knows me, I'm out by 8, maybe 8:30, 9 o'clock and be pushing it. Now, given you have your every other once in a while where you'll be up super late, but for the most part, yeah, I hit the bed pretty hard and then I get up and I focus on what's important to me because I have a crystal clear laser vision of where I want this to go. It made me tunnel vision on exactly what I wanted to do. And I knew, okay, when I wake up, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this. And it was bam, bam, bam. And I was able to work very quickly to make this stuff happen. So for example, I wanted to get my whole studio set up and everything. So if you look behind me and if you're not just listening to the audio, I want to have, a cool little light back here, my bookshelf and my pictures and this whole setup and this big ass light on top of me, because I saw that in my head and I was very focused to say, all right, I know what I want this to look like. And I want it to be high quality. I want it to come across as something that's going to be super helpful and genuine and have a really crisp, sharp kind of look to it. So that's what I was able to accomplish because I knew what I wanted and I created a crystal clear vision. So, one of the biggest things I'll challenge you is start with your why and then have a very dedicated vision of what that looks like. And then just you make it a goal to not veer off the course. Now, every now and then something I've learned just for me personally is, you'll try something and there's a difference between it not working and you just not giving it enough time. And I think that's true in a lot of different cases. And that kind of goes back to the whole shiny object syndrome where, you'll try it for a little bit and say, oh, that didn't work. Oh, no, I gave that a shot or I tried everything. And that didn't work. Okay. And you can apply that concept to every area in your life. Oh, well, I tried dating a couple girls and, they're all blah, or they complained a lot, or they're just kind of sleazy or, whatever. But, you can say the same thing about business. Oh, well, I tried this drop shipping thing, or, oh, I tried real estate, or, oh, I tried this. Dude, sometimes you need to get around the right people. And I just found that was super critical and helpful for everything that I wanted to do. And I'll explain that really as I get into my story, how I surrounded myself by the right kind of people that made all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world. So anyways, the next principle, discipline, consistency, and balance. So having that discipline, again, that kind of goes back into your routine where you do the things that suck. There's a book called Eat That Frog. And in there, the biggest thing that they focus on is that you work on the task that is the hardest, most challenging one to do first thing in the morning, and then everything else throughout the rest of your day is easy. So that's also why I work out first thing in the morning. And this is not a whole health fitness podcast. I'm just using that because this was a reference to what had really shaped and guided my life. And I've really taken those principles and those guides and transfer that into everything I do, including business-wise, because there's a lot of similarities. So having that discipline to wake up in the morning, knowing that if I worked out later on in the day, there's so many other things that can happen, right? And it can be the same thing with your business. If you don't take action today, if you don't post on your social media, if you don't shoot a video, if you don't make that call, if you don't attend that seminar, if you don't, do that webinar or go to this event, what is that costing you? And for me, I knew that when I was working out, if I tried to work out later in the afternoon, there's chores you got to do, there's homework, there's kids you got to deal with, there's all these things that can come up. And it's the same thing in your business. There's so many other things that can just pop up in the middle of the day, or, by you just deciding to not take action within these first 20, 30 minutes, especially when it's fresh in your head, and all of a sudden, I'll do it later. And then a million other things wind up popping up later. That was something I had to learn to say, okay, do it now. And the second it hits you, just to kind of get into that cadence, and that's just the kind of person you become. Between the consistency, knowing that you have to do it every day, in and out, in and out. So that was a huge piece that was challenging for me, right? Because, it's kind of like that pain pleasure principle, especially that Tony Robbins always talks about. And I got to the point, and you might be at the same point, whether that's your health, your fitness, your finances, your relationships, whatever, where it's like, dude, I fucking had enough. I'm so up to here with this shit. I cannot take it anymore. So then you decide to change, and then you do it consistently. And even just, kind of looking back at my weight and my weight loss journey, I've noticed that I fluctuate like this. And then eventually over time, I've learned to make them kind of minor fluctuations where I have to put just a little bit more effort and energy to get to where I want to be. And then I can still, kind of coast and keep it on ideally an upward trend. But the trick is to never stop doing what made you great in the first place. And I've really taken that principle from that I just learned from a number of different guys that are, mentors and success gurus and have written a ton of different books and really implemented that in my own life. And it's just, I've seen amazing, incredible experiences, changes, just, revolutions, ideas, thoughts, whatever you want to call it. It's been tremendously helpful. So my next principle, goal setting. And, as a growing entrepreneur, one of the biggest, most helpful things you can do is set goals. I was watching a training video by Dan Locke the other day, and he said that if you walk pretty much out to anyone on the street and say, what are your goals? Where do you want to be in the next 1 month, 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 3 years, whatever? And the truth is most people don't know. Really interesting quote by Zig Ziglar. He said, how can you hit a target you cannot see? But then how can you see a target you do not have? And it's really it's an interesting concept because basically what it is that you need this goal in front of you to even have any idea of where you're going. Because if it's not there, if you can't see what it is, it's like you're closing your eyes and all of a sudden you're like, well, I'm going to hit that thing. You have no idea what you're pointing to. You have no idea what you're looking at. So you need to first establish a goal because it's you versus you. It's not you versus your neighbor. It's not you versus your parents or your kids. It's not you versus your spouse. It's you versus you. So when you look at yourself in the mirror, the best thing that you can do that I've learned, especially, so I've gone to, a good Tony Robbins seminar, and one of the biggest takeaways was he says, raise your standard. So for you, what is your standard? Like for me, I had to determine that I want to operate like a James Bond, man. I want to operate like a 007. I want to be just badass across the board. And that's even why I made my dream board the way I did. Just sharp kind of guy. Intellectual, great relationship, successful, thriving business, drives badass cars, hangs out with phenomenal, supportive people, can do philanthropy work, he can give, he can donate, he can just be like this incredible human being with positive energy that you really want to surround yourself by. And that's really the kind of person that I wanted to become. So over these past couple years, I've really put a lot of focus and effort towards that. That's why I'm always trying to grow myself. That's why I'll go and I'll do Toastmasters meetings. I want to work on my communication. I want to work how I come across and be able to, accurately reflect my thoughts and my ideas to promote these kind of changes in my life, right? So in order for me to get this message across, for years, I didn't touch social media. I didn't want anything to do with that. I check out a post every now and then, and that was a hurdle for me. So just literally just now that I have my brand and my concept and things I want to do, and I have this confidence behind it, not arrogance, not, full of myself, but, really a humble confidence to say, look, I know that I have a message in this brain that is worth sharing with others that I know that they'll find helpful. So what I want to do is I want to be able to bring that out on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly, consistent basis where I can share this stuff and that you get tremendous value from it where you're like, holy shit, bro, thank you so much. This was really cool. And then for me to always learn, this is a way for me to even selfishly learn from people that have been doing phenomenal things for years that I get to do through my podcast. I get to pick the brain of top best-selling authors and, guys that have 20 plus books and, ran $1 million companies. That's really cool shit. And that's the kind of stuff I get to bring to you. So I get to be this conduit of awesomeness. It's a lot of fun. And that's part of the reason why I put this whole podcast together to be able to bring to you guys. And I'm really excited to do it. So after you set your goals, the next piece, and this kind of goes into everything we're talking about, is be in business for yourself. And the one thing, as I'll kind of continue through with my story, is that the challenge is that when you do the 40-40-40 plan, that model is dead, right? So I'll go and I'll work for this company for 40 years. And then after that, I'll have this money in retirement and my 401k, and I can just, live my life into my retirement age and just chill at home. It's, you look at a model and you stand back from like a third party point of view, and you're just like, why are we doing it that way? Like that's like, it doesn't make sense, right? And like, I don't get it. And that's kind of how I looked at it. And I got to the point where it was driving me crazy. So I was like, okay, I really want to do this thing on my own. Like I know my personality. I don't necessarily like flying Chair Force One every day at a desk for something I just wasn't passionate about. And that's where I was for a long time. So, I remember probably about 4.5, 5 years back, I said, I want to be in business for myself. So that's kind of what's had translated into this whole entire thing. So last couple principles, last 4, networking and giving. The key to having a successful business, and even as I grow mine, is that I've learned that networking is key, right? So it's all about who you know. What you know is important, but it's all about who you know. And your network determines your net worth. So the more people I know, the more influential bodies, the more conversations that I can have on a phone with somebody, or say, hey dude, just checking in, want to see how you've been doing, what's going on. Things like that, being able to go to events, show up. I mean, 80% of it really is just showing up and being there and being willing to put yourself out and say, hey dude, I would love to go buy you a coffee. Can I pick your brain for a little bit? Some of the best relationships I've ever had have come from literally, I kid you not, reaching out on Facebook to guys that I was super impressed by. And I said, I would love to talk to you, man. I'd love to pick your brain. Can I go buy you a coffee at Starbucks? 2 of those guys that I did that with are now they're my best friends. One in particular, Jose Flores. I love the guy to death. We're just like this, and like that one thing had just triggered a bond, and now we work like side by side on multiple projects. So be willing to put yourself out there, and then also being a giver, right? So there's a great book. I want to say it's Adam Grant, I believe, who wrote it. It's called Give and Take, and it's all about he who's a giver winds up receiving so much more. So, especially as we go through, like, it's great to be able to make all this money, right? As an entrepreneur, as a growing entrepreneur. And even if, you're getting your ass handed to you right now, maybe financially, and you're just in a really tough position, and mine is kind of making that transition from the corporate side to starting to, work for other guys from like a solopreneur kind of perspective, to now growing my own business and then wanting to grow that and scale that so I can leverage the power of systems and automation to take my business and put me where I want to be financially. So like, I'm making that transition into still having this financially secure position on a daily basis. But it's a bit of a challenge, right? So, the piece of that, like, entrepreneurial part, it can sound glamorous, it can sound sexy, but a lot of times, like, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a struggle. And that's it, it doesn't. So when I say struggle, I mean, just like, it can be interesting trying to learn everything that goes with it. Because if you've never been in business for yourself, there's a lot of pieces that you need to know on how to implement into what you're doing. You have a very set routine. And again, before we talked about, having that routine, having that discipline. Well, now it's almost like having to break the routine if you were in this 9 to 5 and now transferring and creating your own routine. But how do you do that? Like, what are all the pieces you need to know? So those are the things that, especially from like a group coaching aspect, that's what I go through with small-time entrepreneurs that are really getting up and running, from idea creation to actually putting this, pen to paper, setting your goals, figuring out what does your process look like, what's the legal stuff you need to have, how do you market yourself, like, and everything in between. But it's a heck of a roadmap, right? And that's part of the reason why I really want to do this podcast specifically, is because of all those little things. There's a lot of stuff you really have to take into account. So time management, organization, business systems, the networking portion, like all these things. How do you do that? How do you set goals appropriately? So that's the kind of material that we're going to be putting out on a consistent, just dropping it, a new podcast, a new blog, anything we can do to be able to help you out. And that's also, why we have the daily emails and the weekly emails and everything else, just to make sure we keep you on the right track so you can learn and be as efficient as you possibly can. Okay. Next piece, track it. And this is geared definitely more towards the fitness and the health side. So what isn't measured can't be managed. And again, that's kind of the same thing with the goal setting, right? So, if I just say, for example, I want to lose 15 pounds. All right, so where am I at now? Okay, if I'm at 230 and I want to get down to 215, great. So I have a goal to lose maybe, let's just say 5 pounds per week. And if you're, pretty heavy, it's not a very, very hard goal to accomplish as long as you're consistent. So can you track it like every day? Like, there's a difference between lead measures and between lag measures. And I want to say this is the 4 disciplines of execution. So your lead measure is what really makes the difference. Your lag measure is basically what you can measure, but it doesn't affect the outcome of what's going to happen. So for example, a lag measure for losing weight, that's more stepping on the scale. So the stepping on the scale doesn't change the weight that you're going to weigh. And the same thing, with your finances, like looking at your balance sheet, your income statement of cash flows, like that doesn't necessarily change what happens with your business. Now, the lead measures in losing weight, how many calories did you intake? Okay. How long did you work out? How much water did you drink? Like those are the parts that you really want to be able to track that makes all the difference in the world, because then you can modify, you can tweak, you can make adjustments based on where you're at and where you need to get to per the results that you're seeing. And it's the same thing with the finances portion, right? So am I making my 15 phone calls a day to get 5 prospects to attend a webinar to get, a 10% or 50% closing ratio so I can actually increase sales? So those are the things you definitely want to track and implement into your life. And if you struggle with the tracking portion, totally get it. It's not something that comes normal to most people. But that's one thing that I help entrepreneurs with, to be able to focus on that, because that's such a critical piece of your business. And I know for me, when I started tracking everything that I wanted to put effort and energy towards changing, that's where the magic happens. That's where I can officially say, hey, dude, you want to change this? And I'm talking to myself in the mirror. You need to do this every day. You need to eat like this. You need to work out like this, and blah, blah, blah. And eventually I got to the point where I had just incredible success. So I was really happy about that. The next thing, 10x everything. That's the next principle, 10x everything. And if you're familiar with Grant Cardone, he's got the 10x principle. And it's really the idea is that whatever you think something's going to take, the amount of effort, the amount of energy, the amount of time invested, how much you're willing to put into something, 10x it. Whatever you want your ideal income to be, 10x it. Like just imagine that whatever you think something's going to take is going to take 10 times longer, and whatever you want to achieve, aim 10 times higher. So I think Les Brown said, most people don't fail in life because they aim too high and they miss. Most people fail because they aim too low and they hit. So the thing is, we don't always believe, like we have these limiting beliefs. And when I had got really deep into the coaching portion, what I realized is that the limiting beliefs is what truly holds us back from achieving whatever we want in life. And what I've realized that a lot of times is that we don't think we can hit what we see other people do, because in our minds, we've already decided that it's not possible. Like, oh, I can't hit that, or oh, that's too hard, or oh, that's going to take too much effort, or like too much work. And the truth is, yeah, it might, but you're fully capable of it. You're a human being just like the next human being. You have a brain, you put on pants the same way they do. Like, don't let the word $5 million scare you. Don't let I lost 45 pounds scare you. Like, as long as you're willing to put in the effort and the energy and the time, you can do absolutely incredible things. And that's the kind of stuff I want to show you through this podcast, through this platform, through Growing Entrepreneur, that there's always a new level. You're always growing. There's always something next that you can hit, and it's totally doable. Last piece, plan, do, review. And everything that we talk about is all going to talk about, okay, I'm going to set a plan. So that's your goal. That's my burning desire. Why? This is what I'm going to accomplish. This is what has to happen. Then number 2, we're going to do that plan. Okay. So I'm going to put into action. Massive action is what this is going to take to make this happen. Okay. And then after that, I'm going to review my plan. So I set this goal. I did this thing. What happened? Here's the deal. It doesn't have to be fucking perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect when you start this. I'm still going through, I'm creating artwork for my podcast. I'm putting stuff out as I'm first doing all these things. I'm shooting this video the best that I can. There's a million things I'm probably going to change over time, but look, that's okay. If you're just going to the gym for the first time, it's okay. Just put a plan. I'm going to walk on the treadmill for the first 10 minutes and I'm going to call it a day. Great. Do that 10 minutes and then review. How did I feel? Did I feel better? Did I like it? What will I do tomorrow? And then you set a new plan moving forward to the next step. And then you do that part and then you review it and you just create this process, right? So it makes such a big difference over time. As long as you stay consistent, you plan to review, you can do absolutely incredible things. So let me kind of take you back to the beginning after I had, gone through my weight loss journey with Weight Watchers. And I'll kind of give you the rundown of the career history and the school and like everything else and how that kind of led me to this spot. So I got them all listed out. So when I was between 17 and 19 years old, that's when I was still getting out pretty much out of high school, and I was making my way to college. And that was really when I had taken on my first sales position. So I was doing Cutco knives for a while, and it was a great learning experience, but it taught me a lot of really good, valuable skills, especially for, how to communicate with people. And it's just like, that was one of my first official sales jobs of just learning, what are sales about, and learning from people that had been tremendously successful, really in that entrepreneurial kind of world. So I stuck with that for about 3 years, all the perks that kind of come with it, right? So especially as an entrepreneur, set your own hours, work when you want to, unlimited, commissions as much as you can possibly make, like the whole thing. So I love that concept. So, during this time, I'm getting my undergrad, I'm doing the home fitness workouts. I'm starting to get into like coaching. I'm doing some Cutco sales, and then I jump from the sales into becoming a waiter, right? So, my parents always said, hey, you should try being a waiter. It's good experience. So I did that for a couple years. And then eventually at the age 21, I wound up getting into my first official like corporate 9-to-5, working for a healthcare company. And I was, it was cool because it was started off as like an internship. So I was just like, you start off not knowing anything, getting my hands wet, getting my feet wet, and just, saying, okay, let's try a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. And really, during that time, over the next like 8+ years, I was still working for the same healthcare company, but like it wasn't fulfilling. Like I was kind of the normal thing, right? So like I had found my 9-to-5, I was going to school, getting that part done, and I wanted more. Like I wanted to feel like I was really having an impact, and what I was doing there, it wasn't doing it for me. Like I wasn't connecting. It wasn't being like the best version of myself. So in between that, I graduated, I got my undergrad, and I took like the next 2 years, like as soon as I was done, to figure out like, what do I want to do? Like really at the end of the day, here's a question I asked myself. I said, if time and money were not an issue, how would I spend my day? And that was one of the most profound questions I ever asked myself. And I remember I've taken so much time just to sit there and stare off or close my eyes and say, all right, like, what do I see myself doing? Like, what's going to make me happy? And I didn't have that answer for like the longest time. So dude, I tried everything. What else did I try? I think I tried digital art. So, like digital drawings, doing like, video stuff. I tried cooking. I tried being a firefighter. I was, doing like sales for a little bit. Like there were a number of pieces that it didn't seem to fit in with where I wanted to go. And I didn't have any entrepreneurs to surround myself by. So like I didn't have anyone going to me saying, dude, you're 100% entrepreneur. Like you've got your own ideas. You've got your own thoughts. Take that and make a business out of it. So I didn't really like know how to make that transition. All I knew was that I wanted to be sort of in the middle of any kind of thing that had to do with, coaching somebody to get from point A to point B. And like, that was it. That was all I knew. So at the same time, after going through those, the kind of like 2-year hopscotch between trying to figure stuff out, my parents were like, dude, go back, get your master's degree, knock it out. And then you can go from there and hopefully race through the company or whatever that's going to transition into. So 2 years after, I basically go in, I say, all right, I'm ready. So 2013, I hop in and I go for my master's at FAU. And during that time period, bust my ass, plenty of hours, in on Saturdays, doing the study and doing the homework, pretty good underlying foundation of, all thing business. So it was business oriented. It was the College of Business. That's what I had focused on. So I got my MBA. And after that, so 2015, I graduate. Between 2015 and 2017, my understanding was that it would allow me to kind of race through the company and, get a raise, bigger position, whatever. Never came. Never happened. So kind of put me in this spot where I'm still doing the same thing day in and day out. And I just like, I can't do this anymore. Like it was driving me bananas, and I had no other way to get out of this. And at that time, I was dating my current girlfriend, Jess, at that time. And, so we were already moved in together. We had a spot. We had our kids living with us. And there had to be a change. I didn't know how to do it. And through that 2-year time period up until that point, I decided to go after any certification that I possibly could. So between 2015 and 2017, if it looked like it had to do with coaching, it was kind of like a shotgun approach. So I started off with like health and fitness. So I had gotten my personal trainer certification. So that was a NASM. So I got my personal trainer certification. I got P90X and Insanity certified. So that way I could teach courses and classes. And I was actually teaching at the YMCA for a while. So I tried that route, and that didn't quite lead to where I wanted to go. It wasn't something that was super scalable. It was still trading time for dollars. It wasn't necessarily like high-end clients. So it was a good experience, but it's not the way I wanted to take it. So then I also decided to get my life coaching certification. That was close to like an 18-month program. I got that. Les Brown, the motivational speaker, wound up having an institute in Fort Lauderdale. So I registered, I got signed up for that. I got that taken care of. And so the funny part was like all of these pieces that I wanted to do all wrapped up at like pretty much the same exact time, which was really cool. So come 2017, within those 2 years, and I decided to make this jump. I remember there was one morning that I had talked to Jess, and it was super early. We were getting ready for work. And I said, babe, I want to cash in my 401k and I want to leave my job. And she's like, all right, well, I totally support you. I got your back. And that to me, that was the game changer. So I basically walked in. I had somewhat of an idea. I had like somewhat of a plan of like what was going to happen and like how this was going to go. And I wind up walking into my boss's office that morning. I had this energy like just in me as I was walking to the front door. So I remember walking in and I sat down and I said, I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for everything you've done. But here's my notice. And I wound up giving them, instead of 30 days, I actually gave them, or 2 weeks, I gave them 90 days worth of time, just because, incorporated can be so hard to really find that right person and to get you where you want to go. So I said, look, out of respect for you, and also so I make sure I have a game plan, here's my 90-day notice. So what I had ended up doing was I basically, within that time frame, I cashed my 401k. I had about 22 grand in my name. And I knew that would be enough to get me by for the next couple months just so I could make that transition. And I got really close with the CEO and founder of the Les Brown Institute, Matt. He and I became like this. And when I talked to him, like, Matt, look, I want to get out of corporate, bro. Like, I want to work with you. I don't know what it's in. I love to train. I love to coach. I love to teach. Like, let's do something. So come to find out, he's like, dude, all right, you know what? We'll make it happen. I said, look, test me out. All right. Let me come in. I'll work for you minimum 500 a week. If you like me, keep me. If you don't, chuck me. I'll figure something else. And he's like, you want to do that? I said, yeah. So I'm like, all right, cool, let's do it. So basically, I started working with Matt, and I didn't even realize this. He actually taught automotive sales. So he had been in the car industry forever. And so I decided to take it on, and I watched a number of their trainings. I'm really good at just being able to catch up on stuff and just understand something and then kind of like make it my own. And I did. And for close to a year, I wound up teaching automotive sales with Matt and helping him and his partner out, and loved it. And the students got so much from it. Now, given yes, I didn't actually sell cars previously, but it was really sales concepts. It was the idea. It was okay, taking all their experience, all their knowledge, and just being able to share that with brand new students that would come in. So it worked phenomenal. And it got to the point where, he had to kind of put his focus on one way or the other. So, he kept it with like the Les Brown part, and I wound up making a transition. So funny enough, the way that happened, Matt was working out of a college, and a couple guys had randomly walked in. They were looking for some space, and three gentlemen, and they were looking at this room on the other side. And one conversation just led to the next, and hey, what are you guys doing? What are you up to? Come to find out, they've actually got two startup companies, more based on like lead generation from like a legal and a solar perspective. And myself and one other gentleman that had also been working with Matt, we basically transitioned and just started working with these guys. So that was like really my first taste for a startup, which was really interesting. And it was cool because you go in with these guys that have been super successful in the past. So this was really like my first taste. This was my ability to kind of just sink my teeth into something and start it from like ground floor up. So fast forward about 6 months later, and they have no more cash flow. like none. Like we burned through it and just didn't get to where we wanted it to go. And like I'll say, man, that was such an interesting lesson, interesting takeaway of holy shit, you're putting in this time effort to come around, and then one day realize that 2 weeks has gone by and now you're not getting paid for that. So I didn't have, and I, when I initially had gone into work for these guys, great guys, and this is just stuff that naturally happens in business, but it was with the promise, okay, like I'll work for a low amount now, so you reap big rewards on the back end. And I tend to get driven and connect with guys that have huge visions, huge goals. And this was a huge goal, like for them, like, like guys, if we can even do a quarter of what we've done in our previous businesses, like we'll blow this out of the water. And I said, look, no problem. I understand we got to keep, the operating budget low and everything. So I'll come and I'll work for you for a modest salary, enough to get me by on a monthly basis. So obviously I wasn't saving up money on the side. And then bam, like 2 weeks later, hey guys, we can't pay you for these past 2 weeks. And I'm not sure if we can pay you afterwards. So we had to like make something happen super, super quick. So I called one of the other partners, and he actually wanted to start up another company in a CBD line. And so we met within like a couple days after I had gotten the news, sat down. He said, well, tell you what, I want two solid guys. So I called my other buddy that had been working with me, and now we're in a CBD company. So coming from the guy that has like never touched, weed, marijuana, CBD, any kind of like oils or anything like that, it was totally brand new territory. And when I first started doing that, it was like feet to the fire. I remember when I first got in there with him, we're creating all this stuff, and he had built out a lot of things, but now this was a chance for us to take the operational hat, put that on, and make all this stuff go seamlessly. And the first major project we had was to get like 100 investors at Las Vegas for like a whole like 2-day massive event. Like I'd never thrown an event before. This was all brand new to me, and wow, what a learning curve. So like all these bits and pieces I had been going along and learning were phenomenal. And then I think I did that for almost 2 years. I was working with that. It was going well. And I had this spark, I had this opportunity where I'm like, you know what? They're doing good. I'm going to transition out of that. And I now had a chance to actually work with another guy who did coaching full time. So basically transitioning from the CBD to this other gentleman, I got a chance to work with him for about 5 months, and totally different perspective, right? So more of like your solo entrepreneur. He's been super successful in the past, and I got to run some operations and set up, automations and systems for him in the back end. And then that went really well. That was about a 5-month engagement, and then transitioned out of that to now being able to work as a full-time coach, doing Growing Entrepreneur, and one other thing on the back end of that. So over the past 2 years, I wound up connecting with a woman who's become my accountability partner. And if you've never had an accountability partner, it can be tremendously helpful, because that is the person that you talk to practically every day, where you get to literally check in and just make sure you're on the straight and narrow. So she's been a person I've been talking with for a pretty consistent long time, almost like an hour every single day. And through that, I knew she was building out this coaching academy. And this transition from the last guy I was working with to now actually worked really beautifully. So now I get to be a lead trainer for her, doing that a couple hours during the week. At the same time, being able to focus on my brand and build that up and help other coaches. So needless to say, I say all that to say it's been quite the journey. It's, probably not the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Orthodox. There's certainly a couple things that I'd probably recommend that you don't do, like cashing in your 401k if there's other options, to make sure that you have something steady with like a solid game plan. But look, these were decisions that I made that shaped the person I am today, and I'm thankful for it. Financially, this is something that I'm definitely working towards. I want to build it up where I've got that consistent income coming in from multiple streams. That's a lot of what I'm going to be focusing on and talking to these guys about on these podcasts. There's going to be a lot of bits and pieces, and I want to hear from you. Like, what are the things that you want to learn about? Like, as a growing entrepreneur, where are your biggest struggles? Is it time management? Is it budgeting? Is it how do I scale? How do I get virtual assistants? How do I move from brick and mortar to online, and start going digital? How do you tell your story? How do you get a podcast up and running? How do you leverage all this? How do you create a scene like this? Like all tips and tricks for like cool video and camera work. How do you manage all these different bits of your pieces so that way you can actually still have time with your family and live a balanced life? So, when I first had written my book, the 13 Principles to Achieve Greatness, the whole idea behind that was to say, okay, from a very high level, here's the areas that, you really want to try and focus on. And then that's going to lead really into this Growing Entrepreneur podcast and show and everything else, because this is really what's going to give you the meat and the core and like the how-tos of how to get shit done. How do you really take what you want and turn that into a translatable, hands-on business that is actually tangible and that you can focus on every day and you can grow, and just be the best version of yourself doing that, right? So look, I know that was a lot to spew, and I'm sure there's always bits and pieces in between there that I can harp on a little bit more, or if there's one thing in particular about my story, or catch it in your 401k of like the do's and the don't do's, and was it a good move, was it not a good move, and we can have certain like segments and kind of silo those out. But outside of that, I mean, that's kind of been my life in a nutshell. So, I mean, to recap, I'm 32 years old, living in West Palm Beach, Florida, beautiful significant other going on 6 years. She comes with 2 kids. So yes, I went from single to stepdad really quick. And, I mean, I knew what it was like because my parents had gotten separated. So like I've been in their position. So really just trying to be the best version that I possibly can, trying to be this role model, teach them how, to do all these things from a young age that, my mom had shown me in terms of budgeting, living a healthy lifestyle, being respectful, I mean, like all the pieces that are important. And that's really what I want to bring to this. So look, I hope you got a lot from this episode. It's my first official intro episode, so I'm sure at some point I might even reshoot it. If you're watching this and you're actually listening to the first episode, awesome. I'd love for you to continue on the journey. If you're on episode, I'm sure maybe 386, and all of a sudden you come back, you're like, I wonder what his first episode looks like. Well, this is it. One thing I will say for myself as I go through these, I'm always trying to get better. The way that I come off, the way that you view everything, the topics that I touch on. So I'm very open to feedback. One thing that I do always talk to my team and people I work with is if there's something good, let's talk about it. Let's bring it to the table. If there's something that's bad or needs to be changed, let's definitely talk about it. Let's definitely bring it to the table, because if you don't address it, then it can't be fixed. You don't know what there is to change. So I say that to say that if there's something that you see that you're like, hey, Brendan, you're doing great on this, but I'd love to see like this change, or can you add more here, or can you tweak that? Or like when you speak, maybe I have a tendency to speak very fast. So like I can get very excited and I can go a million miles an hour. I can talk really, really quick. So I've had to learn how to kind of slow down so that way I can get my message across effectively. So, I appreciate any feedback you can give. And look, all I can say is please hone into these episodes, listen, get as many golden nuggets as it from you it's English. Get as many golden nuggets from these episodes as you possibly can. And I'm going to try and bring on the best of the best for you guys. Like the second episode I got was with a guy, Mike McCauley. He's a New York Times bestseller. He's got 6 books, incredible dude. Like bringing on guys like that is what I want to do, man. Massive value, maximum value. So, all right. I think I'm done. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please tune in, like, subscribe, and let me know what your thoughts are, how I can provide and serve you, and I will see you on the official episode 1 coming up right after this. Hey, it's Brendan, and thank you so much for listening to the Growing Entrepreneur Podcast. Look, if you enjoyed this episode and want more content just like this, do me a favor, hit the like and the subscribe button. That way I can create consistent content on a daily basis focused on what's important to you. Also, leave a comment. I'll make sure to get back to it as soon as possible. I will see you on the next episode.